Alright, so this is my submission of Dungeon Magic, an arcade game released by Taito in the early 90s. And a lot of people that actually know of this game tend to liken it to the Dungeons & Dragons arcade games, which came out about the same time. But this game's got some interesting differences to it that are very relevant for speedrun. So this character I'm going with here, who is totally not a rip-off of a character from Berserk. The reason I went with him is, for one thing, he has the best damage output. Part of that is due to the fact that his punches are really fast, but it's also because of the way this game's attack combos work. You can essentially do a kind of pseudo-infinite with him because, unlike a lot of other beat-em-ups, the game doesn't really store your position in your attack string. So if you start doing your combo, and then pause, and then start attacking again, it'll reset the combo. And because of his punches come out so fast, you can essentially keep enemies mostly locked in hit stun, or at least hit him fast enough that they don't really get a chance to retaliate for the most part. So that's one aspect to this game, and the other aspect you'll see here is there's some exploration going on. A lot of these stages tend to have multiple paths you can go through. The ones I'm going with, obviously, are the ones that get you to stage the quickest. And here with this first main boss, one of the few instances you'll see of using his charge attack here, which is that sword slash, because his punches are a little too high for him to be able to hit the snake's head effectively. And there's two different ways this fight can go, and here's the way you want it to happen, is when the snake coils around you, just use a magic blast there to hit multiple parts of his body for huge damage. You start out with the 3 stocks of magic, but you can get more as the game goes on. And this is the first room, one of the first rooms where you see that combo being used, and it's especially effective against these knights. These are one of the classes of enemies that are usually more dangerous to fight because they have a random chance of doing counterattacks when they come out hit stun. But by using that pseudo infinite, I can beat out their counters. And with the exploration in this game, there's also some puzzle solving involved. Like, for example, let's smash that pillar there and it opens that top door. There's a lot of triggers in this game that involve destroying certain objects or killing certain enemies in order to progress. And you probably noticed, and you saw how it says there, hit weak. There's different elemental weapons each character can find. You notice that I picked up that frozen arm weapon earlier in the stage. That's going to come in very handy for stage 2. Also, so here's a boss right here. I just softened up his lackeys, and then this is all about trying to keep him on the right side. The big thing I want to do is, besides keep him locked down like that, is I want to knock him down as close to his sword as possible, because whenever that sword gets knocked out of his hands, it'll hover in the air and it'll return to him. And I want to minimize the travel distance between the two, because otherwise, if they're too far apart, the sword just kind of starts circling all around the screen, and it's really annoying to deal with. And going around their side here, I'm going to knock him closer to the center. That just kind of shortens his death animation a little bit. And then we get ourselves some spoils. In this game, your score in this game also counts as your experience points. There is a leveling system in this. So at certain experience point totals, your max health goes up, and it also decreases the charge time for your supercharge attack, which doesn't actually get used in this run, just because it takes way too long for it to come out. So stage 2 is a little more complicated here. I had to go up here to activate that little hologram thing, since that's a trigger for some enemies to come in here. There's a lot of these lizard type enemies. We saw one of the near the end of stage 1. All these lizard enemies take double damage from ice weapons, which is why I picked up that ice weapon in stage 1. So a particular poor trigger you want to hit there to open that door. And then this is one of the rooms where it's all about trying to kill, you have to kill enough enemies to open the door. They can be any type of enemies, but these mimics and green lizards are the easiest way to go about it. This room's the same way, just kill enough enemies. And we'll have another mid-boss coming up here, the last mid-boss of the game, actually. And the way that you fight this one is really interesting. So, the game expects you to use distance attacks, since, as you see there, this mid-boss counterattacks with that fire breath. But if you stand above his head here, his AI tries to reset itself, but it doesn't reset to a position where it can actually hit you. So you can just keep hitting the back of his head over and over. And that takes him out really quickly, and it's also relatively safe. Again, hitting a non-obvious pillar to open a door. And then detouring down here to hit that switch to open this door up here. And most of these rooms you don't actually have to fight anything, it's just trying to get through them as fast as possible. This room is probably one of the more unpredictable rooms in the run, because depending on how those lizards decide to behave, that time they were really well behaved, but sometimes they can move in ways that are just hard to deal with, and they just try to get into your face. Alright, so this spider boss for stage 2, generally not too difficult. Just the big thing to keep in mind is you have to respect her jumps. She's invincible during those. So just do hits, wait for her to recover. And once you do enough damage, these baby spiders pop out, but I can just use a spell to take them all out at one time. And from there, it's just rinse and repeat for this fight. With these boss fights, if you go on for too long, skeletons start to spawn in to make things a little bit difficult. But as long as I do this fight correctly, it gets over with before the skeletons start to become a nuisance. Alright, there we go. And mostly just waiting to match through some text boxes here, and then get ourselves some more sweet treasure. So this third stage coming up is the most complicated of them. This room actually has 3 paths that you can take out of it, but I'm just going to go with the obvious one with the switch on the wall because it's the most straightforward, and it still gets us a critical item that we need for the end game later on. So more spell there, mostly to deal with those little blobs. Those shield orcs can be kind of random. Sometimes they'll randomly block your attacks, and you just have to wait for them to drop your guard and then try to combo them again. Game shock there is intentional. That lightning is slightly random. Sometimes it won't hit you. Most of the time it will, however. And Evil Buster there. The last weapon swap of the game. That is going to be not particularly useful for this stage, but for the final boss it will come immensely in handy. And doing some dashes here. Dashes you just double tap left or right on the control stick or pad or whatever, just to kind of save a couple frames going through some of those rooms. And some more non-obvious puzzles in this room, like you have to break that specific pillar, and then step on that switch on the right. So there's 3 crystals that we have to free as we go through the stage, and we just punch them until they get freed, essentially. Also, you get like these red skeletons that like to randomly teleport behind you, so those are always fun. This room is full of these ghosts here, but their Y-axis hitbox is actually really small, so not really any danger in getting nailed here. And in this room we have a switch puzzle, but it's not too bad. It's just every other switch from left to right. If you miss a switch, it just makes you repeat the puzzle. It doesn't really punish you that harshly. Another 4 switch. And we're the second crystal here, so I just go right into it. These hopping skeletons look threatening, but they really aren't. It's like maybe once in 20 runs they decide to actually try to punch me, but most of the time they'll just hop around like mindless fools. So this room, the best way I found to deal with this room is you want to free those 3 skeletons and then group them up and just combo them to death, and then take out this last one. I'll leave this brown one for last just for safety, because otherwise, trying to corral too many of them at one time. Alright, just more dashing through this room since it's mostly empty. And this room actually does a couple jumps here just to, and then just squeeze between there. So we don't have to deal with those skeletons or those traps there. Sometimes this room can be a little bit tricky, just depending on how that Blue Knight decides to behave. He actually was kind of well behaved there. At least he didn't get into like distance enough to flail me. So anyways, yes, it was all a trick. And this is a rather unfortunate boss right here. They just didn't bother to program in a knockdown flag in this boss's AI, so you can just keep doing the infinite over and over on him. The only real danger is that sometimes his body will like shift to left or right, and sometimes it ends up pushing the crystals into you, but that's really the only danger to this fight. Alright, and with that, we're going to head on into the final stage. This final stage is very straightforward. There's no branching paths or anything. It's just a series of final rooms. Take out those flame-bringing statues there, and then use a spell to soften off these dogs. Finish them off with a dash attack. And then just kind of get these skeletons to come into one another. We like the red skeletons in that if they'll try to like teleport behind you if you're not careful. And also, hey, it's this guy again. And he's a little better armed this time, but the strategy is mostly the same. He tends to not get knocked down though, so you just kind of kite him around and keep landing hits on him. The sword itself is annoying as usual. That shield does, when that shield's dislodged from him, it does shoot that laser. The laser itself doesn't do damage, but it does deal a lot of hit stun. But as long as you just kind of like move him left and right and back again, those weapons aren't really too big of a threat. Alright, all we have to do is break one coffin in this room to open the door. And that coffin also has some magic, so that'll be nice. And now it's time for the final confrontation. So we go up here because I want to have the final boss stay up in this corner since he has to go up here as part of his death animation. And this fight is not representative of how this battle usually goes. This boss is like, I got very, very lucky with his AI on my PB here, but most of the time he is a lot more resilient and threatening. Like, he has a bunch of different attacks that he can do. The one that he does that tends to be the most annoying to deal with in a speedrun is when his health gets down to below 50%, there's a random chance he'll just set himself on fire and then try to dash at you. And he's completely invincible during that whole period where he's on fire, which is why I had the shield in case that happens. So if you just have to wait for him to extinguish himself and then go back at him again. But yeah, rocks fall, but we still made it all alive, so good on us then. This was a 13:59 by SDA timing. Most of my runs in this game tend to fall somewhere in between the 15 to 17 minute range, depending on. A big part of this run is just basically mid-boss RNG, like the snake in stage 1 can be very unpredictable. The final boss, like I just described. But yeah, this one came out pretty well, and that should give you hopefully a good idea of what this would look like as a speedrun. Anyways, I'm going to let the credits play out, as well as the high score entry, because of course it's an arcade game. You gotta leave your mark there. And that will conclude this submission.